This is not simply improbable, it is logically impossible. If the Earth were indeed performing these frantic, multi-vector motions, then the apparent position of the North Star would constantly drift. Its angle above the horizon would waver, its stability would collapse, and it would appear and disappear over time. But we see none of this. Mainstream science tries to explain away the paradox with the idea of axial precession, claiming that Polaris has not always been the pole star, and by the year 3200 other stars such as Vega will take its place. But this explanation, invented to patch the contradiction, simply pushes the problem further away. Why, then, has Polaris remained so perfectly stable for thousands of years, despite Earth's supposed billion-mile-per-hour journey? The explanation rings hollow, another desperate attempt to force observable reality into a preconceived false theory. From the perspective of a flat Earth, however, everything becomes simple. Polaris remains fixed because it is attached to the dome of the firmament, around which the other stars rotate. No imaginary axial precession, no shifting cosmic dance, just constancy and logic. Moreover, countless reports from sailors and explorers describe seeing Polaris far into the southern hemisphere up to 23.5 south latitude, and some claim even further. This is absolutely impossible on a globe, since beyond the equator Polaris should be permanently hidden behind Earth's curvature. Heliocentrists attempt to brush this aside with claims about the tilt of Earth's axis. But even this tilt fails to explain how constellations such as Taurus, Pisces, and Leo are visible across a range from 90 north latitude down to 65 south latitude. On a sphere, such an observation is flatly impossible at any tilt or angle. The only coherent explanation is that these celestial objects move above a flat surface, and their visibility depends on perspective, not curvature. This simple, observable fact, available to anyone willing to look, completely undermines the official cosmic hoax. 1.3. Calculations and flat reality in aviation and maritime affairs. Silent acknowledgement of the truth by those who know. Practice versus theory. Perhaps the most surprising and at the same time the most compelling evidence for the flatness of the Earth is the fact that those who most loudly proclaim its sphericity, those who receive billions for so-called space flights and cosmic research, in practice use a flat Earth model whenever real accuracy is required. In areas where a miscalculation could cost millions of dollars, destroy infrastructure, or take thousands of human lives, the spherical model is quietly abandoned. This is nothing less than a silent confession from those who know the truth best but are forced to conceal it from the public, propping up the imposed lie for their own gain. The glaring gap between theory and practice is itself powerful evidence of deception. Take, for example, a standard university textbook on ballistics, The Science of Projectile and Rocket Motion. Pavliuk's 1996 manual, still widely used for engineering training, states plainly on page 6, it is assumed that the Earth is flat and does not rotate. Gravity is constant and does not change with altitude. Think about it. In ballistics, accuracy is everything. The slightest error means a rocket misses its target or a spacecraft is lost. If Earth were truly a spinning sphere, its rotation, curvature, and variable gravity would have to be factored into every equation. Yet they are ignored not as a convenient simplification, but because they do not exist in reality. Using them would create fatal errors and make targeting impossible. The same picture emerges in aeronautics. In Aeronautics, Part 1, Fundamentals of Navigation and the Use of Geotechnical Means, edited by Saraysky and Oleshkov, 2010, page 270, Opally states, the assumption of a flat Earth does not introduce significant error into the calculated coordinates if the aircraft is within several hundred kilometers, a few hundred miles of the coordinate system axes. In other words, even at altitudes of hundreds of miles, calculations assume a flat, stationary plane. Why, if Earth is a sphere, would the most critical and precise calculations in aviation and rocketry rely on a false model? The answer is simple. They are not simplifications. They are acknowledgments of reality. When nothing is at stake, academics and media can play with the spherical Earth model. But when lives, billions of dollars, and safety are on the line, the flat Earth becomes the only working model. This becomes even clearer when you look at real flight routes. On Flightrider 24, for instance, the route from San Francisco to Dubai appears on a globe as a bizarre arc looping up toward Greenland and the Arctic before swooping back down, wasteful, illogical, and time-consuming. But when that exact route is plotted on an azimuthal flat Earth map with the North Pole at the center and Antarctica forming the boundary, it becomes a perfectly straight line, the shortest, most logical path. Try overlaying multiple real-world routes on such a map. They all make sense on a flat Earth, while on a globe they are absurd detours. The same is true for maritime navigation. Captains on long voyages use azimuth charts because on a spherical model, they would constantly veer off course. GPS systems also operate using calculations that correspond to a flat Earth. Everything requiring practical precision discards the globe. Are we to believe that every pilot, sailor, engineer, ballistics expert, and cartographer in the world is part of some grand conspiracy? Or is the truth much simpler? They use the flat model because it matches reality, and without it, their professions would collapse in chaos. Even NASA itself, the self-proclaimed guardian of the spherical Earth and space exploration, admits as much in its internal documents. In Derivation and Definition of a Linear Aircraft Model, August 1, 1988, an official NASA report, calculations are explicitly based on a stationary, flat, non-rotating Earth. This small technical assumption is in reality a confession. NASA, like every advanced aerospace agency in the world, relies on flat Earth parameters in its practical models because nothing else works. Rockets wouldn't launch, satellites wouldn't orbit, and missions would fail if they used a spinning sphere. This is not mere oversight. It is deliberate compartmentalization. Publicly preach the globe, but privately calculate on a flat Earth. It is a cornerstone of the Great Deception, ensuring that humanity remains ignorant while those in power quietly exploit the truth. 1.4. The myth of gravity and universal deception, an illusion that perpetuates slavery and conceals the truth. The falsification of a fundamental law. We are told, with unwavering certainty, that we are held to the Earth by gravity, an invisible, universal force of attraction, allegedly discovered by the great Isaac Newton. This force, they say, makes apples fall from trees, giving rise to the myth of Newton's apple, which quite possibly never fell, keeps the planets in their orbits, and serves as the glue that holds the entire universe together. According to official science, it is the very foundation of physical reality. And yet, a single uncomfortable question cracks this entire edifice. Who actually measured the so-called gravitational constant G, the cornerstone of this law, through direct, independent experiment, and when? The official answer is not only unconvincing, it borders on the absurd. The constant seems to have appeared out of nowhere, reverse-engineered to fit Newton's theory so that the equations would work. Mainstream history credits the first measurement of G to English scientist Henry Cavendish, who in 17,971,798 conducted his famous torsion balance experiment. This is endlessly cited as irrefutable proof of gravity's existence and measurability. But a closer, impartial look at Cavendish's original notes reveals a startling truth. He never set out to measure G at all. His stated goal was to estimate the density of the Earth by observing the attraction between large lead spheres and smaller test masses. He worked with already assumed values for Earth's mass itself, not directly measured but calculated, and from this, others anonymous figures conveniently lost to history extracted the value of G afterward. Cavendish himself never published such a constant. In other words, the gravitational constant was not discovered through transparent, reproducible experimentation. It was tailored to fit Newton's theory so that the mathematics would balance. The conclusion came first, the numbers were adjusted to match it. Sadly, this is far from unique in the history of official science. Again and again, dogmas are declared first, and then data are retrofitted to support them, rewriting both theory and history as needed. The figure of Henry Cavendish only deepens suspicion. Far from the archetype of a celebrated scientific pioneer, he was an eccentric recluse, pathologically shy, who avoided people, never completed his studies at Cambridge, and shunned publication of his work. He left instructions to be buried in a sealed tomb without name or date, and his body was never autopsied, making definitive identification impossible. His vast manuscripts were discovered nearly a century later and published not by him, but by James Clerk Maxwell, who had every opportunity to interpret them in whatever way best supported the prevailing paradigm. Was Cavendish himself truly the father of this supposed discovery? Or was his name and persona simply used as a convenient mask, retroactively granting scientific legitimacy to an invented constant, a theoretical prop required to support the heliocentric model and its spherical Earth? This mystery at the very foundation of modern physics is a flashing red warning light. If gravity were such a fundamental force, so obvious and measurable, then why is its supposed constant so elusive, so difficult to measure, so shrouded in contradictions and mystery? Why does its discovery hang on such a dubious story and such an uncharacteristically strange figure? The answer is clear. Gravity was never a law. It is a mathematical crutch fabricated to justify a flawed cosmology. Without it, the notion of a spinning ball Earth hurtling through an empty void collapses instantly. Gravity exists not to describe reality, but to distort it, an illusion designed to keep humanity trapped in a false paradigm, obedient and enslaved under the weight of a lie. 1.5. NASA's Space Deception, a factory of illusions, astronaut actors, and billions spent on fakes. Testimony from within and its true meaning. If the Earth is flat and gravity nothing but a myth, then the entire edifice of space exploration, satellites in orbit, lunar missions, Mars rovers, and even the International Space Station collapses like a house of cards. And at the very center of this colossal illusion stands NASA, the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Officially, NASA is hailed as humanity's flagship of science and progress, the shining symbol of our quest for the stars. In reality, according to countless independent researchers and former insiders, it is nothing more than the world's largest illusion factory, an institution dedicated not to exploration, but to deception. One former NASA employee, a computer engineer who worked for the agency for 2 decades until the late 1990s, confessed openly, "Everyone at NASA knows the Earth is flat, and they laugh at the public." These are not the words of a conspiracy blogger. They are testimony from within the very machine that has shaped our view of space for generations. She recalled that her colleagues casually joked about the fake moon landings and ridiculed those who believed in them. Her own awakening came only after 11 years at the agency, when a senior engineer told her outright that the Earth is flat. From that point, she began researching not only NASA's deceptions but also the 9/11's narrative and the chemtrails agenda, issues we will return to in Chapter 8. And she is not alone. Similar voices from ex-insiders have surfaced, but the mainstream media systematically silences, ridicules,